Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to the Cultural Studies Podcast. My name is Toby Miller, and my guest today is.
Sharon Coen from the University of Salford.
It's so nice to meet you, Prof. Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to start with my usual request or question, which is to ask what's currently impeding, dynamizing, interesting, preoccupying you. What's going on for the Prof?
Okay, so the part that is preoccupying me most is the apparent blindness. And, I feel like we're sleepwalking in a climate disaster. And there has been a recent emergency meeting in the UK that has seen very limited coverage in the news in the UK. So that is, I must say, the one thing that I'm kind of worried about. Um, I just feel like I'm not doing enough in that field at the moment. On the other hand, what's dynamizing me is just last night I saw that there has been a vote in the European Parliament where women have finally uh, won a vote for getting legal abortion right across the EU. And there were loads of people kind of celebrating the event. And I think that is a move in the right direction in terms of seeing. I love seeing women in parliament just celebrating, and the sorority and the joy that they were bringing. And that's also what's interesting me, finally enough. I'm getting more and more interested in why are we so worried about negative emotions? Like most of our days are spent focusing on negative emotions and the risks, the thing that make us angry. And there is a lot that is going on that is showing that positive emotion can be actually quite useful in the civic life. So that's one thing that I'm trying to explore. And I'm also dynamized. Yes, because in the UK there is a lot of right wing rhetoric that is taking overtaking really the public sphere when it comes to listening to what people talk about, how people talk about things, and the the way in which people talk about things as well. I don't know if you guys heard about this raise the color, raise the flag movement, where millionaires have paid uh, a lot of money to get flags everywhere around the UK, and there has been an empowering of right wing rhetoric in the UK. I started getting out of the ivory tower and spending a bit more time in the streets. And I've been frontliner with movements that try to oppose this kind of rhetoric, and they stand up to racism and things like that. And that's dynamizing me because I feel finally I found a way to bring together what I know and who I am in the same.
No, that's beautiful. And actually, Prof, you mentioned abortion. There are now somewhat clandestine movements in Britain amongst politicians to criminalize abortion. There are, numerous very reactionary politicians with religious affiliations that are very strong within the House of Commons and I think the Lords, who are trying to reverse decades of achievement. So it is a very critical issue. I wonder if I could ask you about the difference between negative and positive abortion.
Abortion.
Yeah, you mentioned negative and positive. Yeah.
No, no, sorry, is my pronunciation. I meant emotions.
Oh,
Emotions.
emotions. Oh my God.
Sorry.
That's so funny.
Oh,
That's
that must
funny.
have sounded very
That's so
weird.
funny. My apologies to you and to the listeners. It's not your accent.
Sorry.
That's funny. But yes, what is a positive abortion versus what is a negative abortion? This would be a very interesting concept, and I'd not
For
heard that
sure.
before. Mil gracias, querida. ¿Qué tal? ¿Todo bien? Todo bien, gracias. Muy amable, ¿vale? And okay, positive and negative emotions. Let's get back to that now that I have to rethink it. Can you explain to us about, I think we all know about positive versus negative emotions, but can you explain that to us in the EU context?
In EU. Oh, well, that's an interesting question. So, in the literature, in media and communication, for example, there is, and in political sciences, actually, there is a lot of work that tries to explain what underpins people's engagement in political issues. And when it comes to media, there is the old saying, if it bleeds, it leads. That is all about how negative emotions are the drivers of engagement. And the idea is that, for example, moral outrage, anger, fear are so disgust, are so powerful emotional reactions that if triggered, will push the individuals to engage and act as a result of the experience of those emotions. And that's certainly the case. There are books, there is a lot of evidence. It's indisputable that that's definitely the case. However, there is a growing body of literature that shows that actually positive emotions, such as joy, feeling of empowerment, feeling of community and togetherness, they are actually quite powerful when it comes to crowd, for example, crowd behavior, when you're in the street, solidarity, etc. And if as a psychologist, I've been thinking of it, especially in this period that I'm seeing loads of people in the front line from the right wing, etc. And it makes me think, what are these people looking for? What are they finding in these groups? Why are they so keen in behaving the way they do? And part of the answer that I found in myself by observing others, but also in the literature, is that they find a sense of fulfillment, which is a positive emotion. you know so I was thinking, we're not understanding enough, we're not really banking on this thing. That was until this morning, where I found that there is a recently published systematic review that seems to suggest that positive emotions are actually um, impeding civic engagement. I haven't read it yet, so I might change my mind tomorrow. But today, I think it's worth looking at that.
Now, this relates for me to some of the very valuable work that you've done on the way in which people can respond to stimuli, rhetoric, ideology, media messages on some really, really crucial social issues. And one you've already touched on, actually, in your opening remarks is that of the question of immigration in Europe.
Mhm.
And you mentioned the UK in particular. I am deeply, deeply concerned about this, I have to say, and ashamed of it. I'm a citizen of both of three countries, Britain, the United States, and Australia. And I'm particularly horrified, obviously, by what's going on in the United States. I think you said when we first started chatting that you're from Italy originally, and clearly there are real issues across the European Union, Provecho, and in Britain over these sorts of questions. Could you take us through your research on immigration and what, for you, in your thinking, seems to be propelling this appalling ethno-nationalism of today?
Mm. Well, I've done very little actual research on immigration other than looking at the coverage that media coverage of
Yeah,
immigration,
sure,
immigrant
exactly. I
issues,
understand. And
etc. But what I've done that I really liked doing was to try and understand how is the argument about immigration leveraged in the political debate in the EU. So I published, and this was a blog, not an academic paper, but I thought it was quite useful to demonstrate to the general public how our work goes. What does it mean? How does it happen? And what are the consequences of what we study? So, what I did with a colleague of mine who's a brilliant psychologist with qualitative research and discourse analysis skills, we looked at a letter that was published by European politicians, including Meloni. I mean, Meloni was one of the main signatories of this letter, where they were basically claiming that the European Convention for Human Rights needed to be updated and reviewed because it was somehow impeding their work and making it difficult for them to keep their population safe and send back to their country these horrible criminal immigrants that take advantage of the systems and the immigration. And what we did was quite simply using the basic, and they are quite basic principles in psychology about rhetoric, like, dating back to Aristotle and how he says, well, if you want to be persuasive, you leverage ethos, that is your authority, the establishment of authority, pathos, the emotional side, and logos, the reasoning. And these three elements were all present in the letter. And they were leveraging arguments about, well, we are populist arguments like we are representing our people, we are the best representative of our people, and we are the voice of our citizens. Pathos was leveraged. Oh, pathos was leveraged by looking at how dangerous these immigrants were because they were taking advantage of a system and they were posing a threat to the point that they presented immigrants as an existential threat to the democracy and the
yeah,
state.
yeah.
And Logos was like, if we see all this threat coming in and we see that the Convention of Human Rights is being used to stop us from being able to protect our people, then we should get rid of it or change it, etc., etc. There was very little critical consideration of what actually the level of threat is, the proportionality of the responses, the fact that we're talking about a minute minority of
Yeah.
people who
I,
are actually taking advantage.
I
So I love that. And I try when I teach, I try to get my students to do a similar thing. So yes, it's great to publish paper in academic journal. Yes, it's great. But what I love about what we do
yeah,
is that you can use it in everyday,
right.
to analyze how people are talking to you, what is going on around you. And I love one PhD student of mine, she says, you live and breathe psychology. And for me, that's what it is. One should
Lovely.
live and breathe what you do.
Can I ask you a question about pedagogy before we move on to more of your research? I read on the Salford website that you and your colleague run the only master's degree in media psychology in Britain. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, the masters is being refurbished at the moment, so we're giving it a good refurbishing, and it's going to come back with a bang, hopefully next year. Basically, surprisingly for me, media psychology, while it's very popular in the US, in Germany, in India, even, there are there are studies in media psychology. There is a book published by Navin Kumar in media psychology in India as well. In England, it never took off as a subject per se. So we thought, well, there's a gap. And why not actually pushing forward this fantastic subject that has all to do with understanding how our interaction with media plays a role in the way we think and perceive and act within our world. um, there is quite a lot of cyber psychology work, so people focusing on the digital element of communication, and there are cyber psychology courses. But what I love about media psychology is that the first thing that I always ask myself whenever I see anything new coming, any new technological toy that we can think about, is what's new about it? Because a lot of the processes and a lot of the things that we observe are actually things that we see occurring over and over again. I always use the example of Socrates, that never wrote a single word. He hated writing and was saying that it would make us stupid. And there is a fabulous passage, I don't remember where it's written, but where Plato talks about, reports on Socrates talking about writing. And it could be a piece written like now by someone talking about the internet or, AI or whatever. So there are things that are kind of timeless and you see occurring over and over again. However, when I studied arts, my teacher always told me, you look at the lights and the shadow. Uh, if you look at presence and absence in order to understand a phenomenon. So there are certainly things in new media that are unique to that particular tool or mediated environment. But if we are not able to kind of detach the two and see what's constant, what's not changing,
Mm-hmm.
we will never be able to fully understand what is the novelty, what is the new thing.
I think
So
also there's a certain banality in the continued attempt to connect human responses to the media with human activity. Media effects debates that have gone on in effect for centuries and really continue to operate with two polarities: massive hypodermic needle effect versus complete autonomy on the part of a reader's liberation movement. And this is a thing that parents, children, governments, corporations, the bourgeois media never tire of. But there are so many other questions that are relevant. And this brings me on to another part of your work that I think is incredibly valuable and important, which is to do with the environment and climate change. Because this is an area where we see monumental media distortion, media activity, and controversy. For example, right now in the United States, the government's federal policy is to remove all consideration of the environment from, I was going to say affirmative action, from artificial intelligence debates and science. So I wanted to ask you a bit about the research you and your colleagues have done on communications and the environment, and also what you see as the current state of debate on those topics. Well, I have another mouthful, Prof.
yes, enjoy. It looks great. So what we've done, I was lucky enough earlier on in my career to meet these two colleagues that are just amazing. And we started looking together at media coverage of climate change. We did initially simple analysis trying to understand what are people saying in response to the coverage of climate change. We are talking 2008, 2009. It was the first study. And it was just broadly asking what sort of issues emerge from the debate, looking at the comments mostly, how people respond to it. And then we started being interested. One paper that I really like is the one that looks at religious metaphors. So how the climate change science and the need to act on climate change and those who advocate for this action were at one point, and still now, I must say, because we've done follow-up research and we did find still much reduced, but still present evidence of this kind of rhetoric, is presented as a religion. Now, what is the main implication of this coverage? Well, if you present science as a religion, then one is free to believe or not believe in a religion. There are many religions. It becomes a matter of opinion, a matter of faith.
Yeah.
It's not something that we need to act upon independently. It's something that you can buy into or not buy into. And our culture quite correctly says that faith is something that is private and you should live on your own by yourself without having anyone coming to tell you what to do or how to do it, which is fair enough when it comes to faith. But if it comes to religion, if it comes to environmental and science, it becomes a problem. That led me to a lot and stop me if I'm going too much off track, but I think one of the new things that has emerged with the new technology is exactly this definition of facts. What is a fact? And how do we understand facts nowadays?
Yeah.
because, like you said, if somebody says to the AI, don't include or don't train your machine on anything that has to do with climate change and climate change science. Now, the public might not be aware of what is the machine trained on or not trained on. They might take the output from the machine as the fact, the thing that we need to rely upon. So then the world of facts becomes defined by that particular tool rather than the tool being a means to find a fact.
No, absolutely. And of course, the other thing that we get is faith or religion, these complex terms, pitted against science, this complex term. So part of the bizarre pro-Israel but anti-Semitic beliefs of the religious evangelical right in the United States is that Israel, for example, must be preserved because it protects the Holy Land from the Arabs, but that all people in that area will die when the second coming appears because they're not proper Christians and they will be sacrificed. And nothing that is happening environmentally matters because it is written by God, the Christian God or a Christian God, that he will preserve everything. And that's an immensely powerful discourse right now in international politics, underpinning a lot of US foreign policy, but also in US domestic climate policy. So, and that relates to another one of your articles, actually, believe it or not, that I think is very important, which is about the construction of expertise.
Thank you. Yes.
And here, expertise apparently can be religious, it can be journalistic, it can be scholarly. And we also saw during the Brexit debate the idea that experts are worth nothing. Well, I don't know about you, Prof, but when I go to the dentist, I want the dentist to have a degree in dentistry, perhaps 2 or 3. When I go to a psychologist, I want the psychologist to have a degree in psychology, perhaps 2 or 3. Would you?
Exactly. No, I completely agree. I mean, what I think is quite interesting, we started observing actually the issue of expertise started becoming very important to me. Firstly, back when I was doing the international studies on media coverage, and we were coding for sources. So, whose voice do we hear in the news and whose voice are represented? So that started putting the question mark in my head, but it takes me a while to digest. So it stayed there for a while, and then we did a little study that was not published. We presented it at a conference on Brexit, exactly on Brexit coverage. Yes, and that's exactly what we were looking at. So how do media present experts? And the key result of that study was that journalists, and I'm sure you will have had the same experience as I have, that sometimes you get a journalist saying, oh, I'm writing a piece on how dangerous social media is. Can you give me a quote? Right? So, what they're doing there is they're coming to you with an angle already and they're filling the gap. Okay, this is the expert quote. And it doesn't matter what you're expert in, really. So what we found uh, on the Brexit study was that you would have the opinion of economists juxtaposed to the opinion of political scientists, close to the opinion of social psychologists or whatever. So it's like completely different areas of expertise were contrasted one against the other without much contextualization and without much opportunity to explain why these opinions might differ and what are the implications within the different areas of influence, so of expertise. So that's where we started, and we then moved on from there. I've been quite active also when it comes to environmental activism. So I was talking to the people in the protest camps, etc. And there was a lot of debate on science, scientific issues, and truth, and what's the real truth, how to get to the real truth.
Yeah.
And that's what really got me interested in understanding who's the expert, how do we define the expertise, what does it mean to be an expert in something, and how do we assign expertise to others as well. So these were all things that led us to analyze the way in which people were commenting
Yes.
on news and presenting themselves or their arguments as experts or expert argumentations. Yeah.
One of the other things related to the environment that you've investigated, this is going back a while, I may have read this article more recently than you have, is about the prospect of augmented reality, not really a concept we hear used anymore, in terms of promoting pro-environmental conduct on the part of people. I guess now we talk about artificial intelligence doing this. But either way, could you speak a little bit about that, about augmented?
Absolutely, yes. You make me so happy because I know that paper is old, but we're actually preparing a grant proposal
Ah,
to revive it. So thank you for that. Hopefully, we'll put it back in the agenda. So, what is the basic idea? The basic idea is that somehow climate change is lived as a phenomenon that is broad, far away, and doesn't really mean much in our everyday life, in our everyday behavior. So, what we thought back then was, what if I bring it? What if I bring it in the place, in the house? What if we, instead of talking about the typhoon that is like damaging a country that is very, very far away, I talk about the consequence of you not changing the temperature in your room or not having double glazing in your house, in your windows. What if I leverage issues about, well, if you put double glazing, you not only will be saving energy, you will also be saving money. So augmented reality is a powerful tool there because we had a simple program by which when people were pointing their device at the window, they were seeing physical illustration of money going out the window. You know? So the idea of that project was really about bringing environmental issues in the house in a way that people can see it and act on it immediately rather than seeing it as something that is far away and distant from them.
bueno, provecho. Gracias, querida. Por favor, de ganar el 15%, ¿vale?
Gracias.
This, I think, is incredibly important because it allows people, as you say, to make the connection between very broad scientific questions and their own personal lives. It still addresses them as the consumer more than the citizen, doesn't it? Is that an issue, do you think?
It is an issue. it's definitely an issue, and
Yeah.
I have been struggling with that myself because I was like, am I doing the right thing by proposing yet another app for another, uh, product to do this? And the answer that I gave myself was that number one, uh, looking at how urgent action is, whatever I can throw at it, I will, whatever I can do to make sure that we take on the message that it's important. But of course, the other thing is that that's not the only intervention. So that particular intervention alone cannot help. But if you combine it with an education system where you are providing the background, explaining the causes, the context, the consequences, and giving the tools to deal with it, the full package, and this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to use it to design an app for schools so that it's combined within the educational system to
Fantastic.
give uh, the full kind of, in Italy we say the il quadro, the full painting, the
Yeah.
full picture. Yes.
Yeah. Hmm. Prof, I have one more question for you, if I may. And once you've answered that, I want to give you the chance to add anything you may wish. That could
Okay.
take the form of retracing steps we've already covered, or it might be something, because I've only got limited access to your research, that I've failed to ask about or that you'd like to talk about. Does that sound okay as a way of coming to a close?
Absolutely.
My last question is going to throw you back many years.
Yeah.
This is to an article that you co-wrote in 2014 as the culmination, I guess, of an 11-nation study looking at the question of the impact of the media via two concepts, media malaise and virtuous circle. This was done with a number of very well-known authors, Shantu Iyengar, James Curran among them, and also friend of mine, David Rowe. Tell us about this content analysis and where that sits in your understanding of the media, what you guys found out and what you think of it today, all these years later, when we're constantly told television doesn't matter and news doesn't matter.
Oh, thank you so much for that question. I was actually thinking about it because I keep going back to that study and to that idea in my mind. Uh, so, for the audience who might not be aware, this was the third and final study that I took part in. That it was a cross-national study in which we combined a content analysis of news with a survey of representative samples of the population. And the idea was that we would at the same time assess the quality of the news coverage on different issues, well, on all issues actually. We did the analysis of all the main body of the newspapers, and in the last version we did newspapers, television news, and online news uh, uh, analysis in terms of content. Uh, Combined with a survey to see what do people learn, how do people feel about particular issues or particular people or groups. And the idea was this does this change, does this relationship or this effect change depending on what is called the media system? That is the way in which media are organized and regulated across different countries. So in media and communication, there are scholars that have tried to cluster different nations on the basis of various dimensions that mean that uh, some nations share aspects of their regulations. So, do we have a liberal system where, like in the US, the public news, the public channel is basically inexistent, is very small and poorly funded, whereas the main news come from very large, privately owned conglomeration. And in Italy, for example, we have a system that used to be a lot more political parallel, which means that there was a clear alignment of the public media with particular political parties, but now we're moving more and more towards the liberal environment. There is the Northern model, Northern Europe model, where there is a big emphasis on the public service and the importance that media play in informing the public. And the idea is, depending on where you are in terms of the system of regulation, the coverage will change. So the things that are talked about will change. And this will also change the way in which people learn or interact with the media content. So that was the key idea. And the paper that you quote was actually my favorite because of all the papers that we published in the years, that's my favorite because actually it was the core of the idea is deeply psychological. And we test a model in which we say, well, exposure to media does not have very much of a direct effect on knowledge or engagement or interest in politics. It's very much of a circular process. That's why we're talking about a virtuous cycle. So people who are more interested tend to demand for more quality coverage, and this more quality coverage increases their sense of efficacy and the sense that they can and do make a difference in their society. That increases their knowledge and competence, and that results in even more interest in politics, etc. So that's the virtuous cycle. Okay, so it's a cyclical issues of mutual kind of reinforcement. And the Malaise element is similarly cyclical, yes, in terms of its effect. What I very much liked in that paper, besides that element, was the analysis that we did with sources. I don't know if you've seen it. It's really a small part of the paper, but I really liked it. and that is because what we managed to show was that yes, the gender gap does not go away. Regardless how many people from the non-traditionally powerful groups, okay, the average citizen appear in the media, that does not help reducing the gap when it comes to gender. But the exposure to media seems to be able to bring up the level of knowledge of people who do not have traditional levels of education when they see more citizens represented in the news. And that's something that I loved. I mean, I think, I told you earlier, that's one of the reasons why I started looking at expertise and definitions of expertise and stuff like that. Because to me, that was an important signal that media can really make a difference and can help, but it needs to be done properly. The representation needs to be done properly. So that was it.
Thank you so much. And Prof, to conclude matters, is there something or are there some things you'd like to add?
I think one of the things that I realized that we're not as disciplines, because I sit in a very interdisciplinary world. That is the world of media psychology. So I kind of managed to look around many different places, and what I love about this is that in this interdisciplinary work really helps you not marry a particular approach or a particular way of doing things. So I think a focus on the issues and what we're trying to do, and less being married to particular approaches or ways of doing things, humility to listen to what others have to say and what we can learn from others. Because while I agree not everybody is a dentist, I also agree that everybody has something to teach you, you know, something different. And you cannot go to a dentist and learn to do a sculpture, probably. But at the same time, a dentist can hardly be Michelangelo. You know what I mean? So everybody will have something to teach us. So yeah, that's the only thing.
Beautifully put, Prof. Thank you so much. Your work is terrific, and I've really enjoyed chatting with you today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Me too. All the best.